Welcome back to our channel, Soap Fans. Today is a beautiful day to unpack the most explosive, jaw-dropping drama shaking the foundations of Los Angeles. Let's dive straight into the chaos. Flesh meets bone in a sickening, echoing crack that shatters the pristine, glass-walled sanctuary of Forrester Creations. This is not just a disagreement over fabric swatches or runway lighting. This is the inevitable, catastrophic collision of fate, bruised egos, and high-stakes consequences. The Forrester legacy is drowning in a pool of bad blood, and the Golden Boy has just drawn first blood against the rising star. The tension has been simmering for weeks, a toxic brew of jealousy and corporate ambition, but no one could have predicted the sheer, unadulterated violence that would erupt in the middle of a design meeting. The crown jewel of Los Angeles fashion is tearing itself apart from the inside out, and the fallout will be absolutely devastating. The catalyst for this unprecedented disaster is the sudden, triumphant return of Thomas Forrester. The prodigal son has marched back into the Forrester Creations building, bringing with him an aura of undeniable genius and an ego to match. The moment Thomas steps off the elevator, the entire atmosphere of the building shifts. The executives whisper, the models stare, and the patriarchs of the family absolutely fawn over him. Eric Forrester and Ridge Forrester, the twin pillars of the fashion empire, immediately drop everything to welcome Thomas back into the fold. They surround him, their eyes gleaming with pride and admiration as they obsess over his latest sketches. Every line, every silhouette, every bold choice Thomas makes is treated like a divine revelation. The Golden Boy is back on his throne, and the entire company is expected to bow. Standing in the suffocating shadow of this triumphant return is R.J. Forrester. For months, R.J. has been bleeding for this company, pouring every ounce of his soul, sweat, and creative energy into proving that he is not just the anointed one by birth, but a legitimate powerhouse designer. He has fought tooth and nail to assert his position, to protect his territory, and to shield his burgeoning relationship with Elektra Forrester from the chaotic crossfire of the family's endless wars. But the moment Thomas unrolls his sketches on the drafting table, R.J. becomes invisible. It is a brutal, immediate erasure. Ridge and Eric do not even glance in R.J.'s direction. All their praise, all their focus, all their resources are instantly redirected to Thomas. R.J. stands in the corner of the design room, his knuckles turning white as he grips a fabric shear, his jaw clenched so tight it threatens to crack under the pressure. The psychological torture of being cast aside is instantaneous and agonizing for R.J. He watches as his father, Ridge, claps Thomas on the shoulder, calling his work the absolute future of the brand. R.J.'s own contributions, the late nights, the stress, the battles he fought against Will Spencer to defend the Forrester name, are completely swept under the rug. The jealousy is not just a spark. It is a raging inferno consuming R.J. from the inside out. He feels entirely marginalized, his voice silenced by the overwhelming, suffocating presence of his older brother. Every time Thomas speaks, every time Thomas confidently corrects a seamstress or adjusts a mannequin, R.J. feels a physical stab of resentment. The design room, once his sanctuary and his proving ground, has instantly transformed into a hostile territory where he is nothing more than an afterthought. The tension reaches a boiling point when Thomas, riding high on the absolute adoration of his father and grandfather, decides to cross a dangerous, unforgivable line. It is not enough for Thomas to dominate the professional space. He decides to assert his dominance in R.J.'s personal life as well. Finding R.J. and Elektra in a quiet moment, Thomas approaches with that signature, arrogant smirk playing on his lips. He does not ask for permission. He simply inserts himself into their dynamic, playing the role of the wise, experienced older brother. Thomas begins dispensing unsolicited, highly critical advice about R.J.'s relationship with Elektra. He questions R.J.'s maturity, his ability to protect her, and his overall judgment, wrapping his insults in a thin veneer of familial concern. It is a calculated, deeply patronizing move designed to make RJ look small in front of the woman he loves. Elektra stands frozen, her eyes darting between the two brothers, the air around them crackling with volatile energy. RJ's blood turns to absolute ice. The sheer audacity of Thomas, a man whose own romantic history is a dark, twisted maze of obsession and destruction, daring to lecture him about how to handle a relationship, is the ultimate insult. RJ's breathing becomes heavy, his chest heaving as he steps directly into Thomas's personal space. The condescension in Thomas's voice is a physical blow, a blatant attempt to humiliate RJ and establish an absolute hierarchy. Thomas is marking his territory, proving that he can effortlessly dominate RJ in the boardroom and in his personal life. The disrespect is palpable, hanging heavily in the air, a lit match thrown directly into a pool of gasoline. The inevitable explosion finally detonates during a high-stakes, all-hands design meeting. The grand boardroom of Forrester Creations is packed. Eric sits at the head of the long glass table, the ultimate judge and jury. Ridge stands by the presentation board, completely captivated by Thomas, who is in the middle of a masterful, charismatic pitch for the upcoming collection. The room is mesmerized. The buyers, the executives, the PR team, they're all eating out of the palm of Thomas's hand. RJ is seated halfway down the table, a dark, stormy cloud of fury. When it is finally RJ's turn to present his concepts, the shift in energy is brutal and immediate. Ridge glances at his watch. Eric offers a polite but dismissive nod. Before RJ can even finish explaining the inspiration behind his lead garment, Thomas interrupts. Thomas casually dissects RJ's design, pointing out its flaws with a ruthless, surgical precision, completely hijacking the presentation. RJ refuses to be silenced any longer. He slams his portfolio shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the boardroom. He stands up, his chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. The room goes dead silent. RJ directly challenges Thomas, his voice dripping with venom and years of pent-up resentment. He calls out Thomas's arrogance, his desperate need for attention, and his manipulative tactics. RJ refuses to back down, publicly dressing down the golden boy in front of the entire executive team. He points a shaking finger at Thomas, declaring that the company does not belong to him anymore. The defiance is absolute. RJ is laying everything on the line, risking his entire career and his standing in the family to finally strike back against the brother who has eclipsed him for far too long. The argument escalates with terrifying speed. The professional facade completely crumbles, replaced by raw, unadulterated family warfare. Thomas, his own temper flaring, fires back, mocking RJ's inexperience and his desperate need for validation. But RJ is entirely off the leash. He becomes wildly insolent, throwing every dark chapter of Thomas's past directly in his face. RJ screams about Thomas's failures, his instability, and his sheer hypocrisy. The disrespect is staggering. RJ is no longer just defending his designs. He is actively trying to destroy Thomas's ego. He taunts him, pushing every single psychological button he can find, refusing to show even a shred of respect for his older brother. The words are vicious, cruel, and designed to inflict maximum emotional damage. RJ is completely out of control, a runaway train of rage and jealousy. Ridge is absolutely paralyzed by the sheer ferocity of the confrontation. He steps between his two sons, his hands raised, desperately shouting for order. Enough. Both of you enough. Ridge bellows, his voice cracking with panic and authority. But his words are completely useless against the hurricane of hatred swirling between Thomas and RJ. Ridge tries to physically separate them, grabbing RJ by the shoulder, but RJ shoves his father's hand away, his eyes locked in a death stare with Thomas. Eric pounds his fist on the glass table, demanding silence, but the patriarch's legendary authority is entirely ignored. The boardroom has devolved into a gladiator arena, and neither brother is willing to surrender. Ridge looks wildly between his boys, entirely helpless, watching the family he desperately tried to hold together fracture into a million irreparable pieces right before his eyes. Thomas is shaking with rage. His jaw is locked, a muscle ticking violently in his cheek. He has endured RJ's insubordination, but the relentless, deeply personal attacks on his character finally push him over the edge. RJ leans in, his face inches from Thomas's, and delivers a final, unforgivable insult. The exact words are drowned out by the collective gasp of the room, but the impact is instantaneous. Thomas's eyes go completely dark. The calculated, reformed designer vanishes, replaced by a man operating on pure, primal instinct. The restraint snaps. The professional decorum shatters. Thomas shifts his weight, his shoulder dropping, his fist clenching with terrifying speed. In a fraction of a second, the verbal sparring transforms into physical violence. The punch lands with devastating, brutal force. Thomas drives his fist directly into RJ's jaw. The impact is sickening, a heavy, meaty thud that instantly silences the entire room. RJ's head snaps back violently, his eyes rolling as the sheer force of the blow lifts him off his feet. Time seems to slow down as RJ crashes backward, his body colliding with a presentation easel before he crumples to the floor in a heap of tangled limbs and scattered sketches. Blood immediately begins to pool at the corner of RJ's mouth. The golden boy has struck down the rising star in front of the entire company. The violence is shocking, raw, and absolutely unprecedented in the hallowed halls of Forrester Creations. Thomas stands over his fallen brother, his chest heaving, his fist still tightly clenched, the absolute reality of what he has just done crashing down upon him. Absolute pandemonium erupts. Ridge lets out a guttural, horrified scream, lunging forward to grab Thomas by the lapels, shoving him violently against the glass wall. "What is wrong with you?" Ridge roars, his face inches from Thomas's, tears of sheer panic and fury pooling in his eyes. Ridge is completely helpless, torn between the urge to destroy Thomas and the desperate need to check on RJ. Eric is on his feet, his face pale with shock, barking orders for security and a medic. Electra, who had been watching from the doorway, screams RJ's name, rushing to his side, her hands trembling as she touches his bruised and bleeding face. The boardroom is a disaster zone of scattered papers, overturned chairs, and shattered family bonds. The Forrester men are physically tearing each other apart, and there is absolutely no going back from this moment. While the Forrester empire implodes in a spectacular display of violence and jealousy, the sharks are already circling the bloody waters. Across town, the news of the physical altercation spreads like wildfire. Will Spencer, still licking his own wounds from his previous brawls with RJ, receives the tip-off. A slow, predatory smile spreads across Will's face. The Spencers have been waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and the Forrester Civil War has just handed them the ultimate weapon. Will immediately marches into Bill Spencer's office, delivering the explosive news. The Golden family is fractured. The Kosios are distracted by the violence between their sons. The internal division is catastrophic, and the company is entirely vulnerable. The Spencers realize that they do not even need to attack Forrester Creations directly. The Forresters are doing the job for them. This physical assault is not just a family tragedy. It is a massive corporate liability. Will Spencer knows exactly how to exploit this division. With RJ battered and humiliated, and Thomas potentially facing severe disciplinary action or even assault charges, the design team at Forrester is completely paralyzed. Will and Bill begin orchestrating a ruthless, coordinated attack on Forrester's vulnerable market share. They plan to leak the details of the boardroom brawl to the press, painting Forrester Creations as a toxic, unstable environment completely unfit to lead the fashion industry. The Spencers are weaponizing the Forrester brothers' hatred for one another. As Ridge kneels on the boardroom floor, desperately trying to stop the bleeding from RJ's jaw while screaming at Thomas, he fails to realize that the real threat is not inside the room. The real threat is the Spencer empire, armed and ready to obliterate the divided Forrester legacy once and for all. With the Forrester brothers shedding blood in the boardroom, will the Spencers finally crush their divided empire? Next, Sheila Carter is cashing in her chips, and Taylor Hayes is about to pay the ultimate price. A massive, unavoidable collision of fate and high-stakes consequences is barreling straight for the Forrester Cliff House. And this time, the weapon of choice is not a loaded gun or a sharpened knife. It is a signed divorce paper and a mother's desperate, unthinkable betrayal. Taylor Hayes is about to sell out her own daughter to keep the man she loves, and the explosive fallout will shatter the Forrester family into a million irreparable pieces. The storm hitting Los Angeles is unprecedented, and Sheila is standing front and center, directing the lightning. The divorce papers were never a white flag of surrender. They were a brilliant, calculated Trojan horse. Anyone who knows how Sheila Carter operates understands that she does not surrender. She simply reloads her weapon. The ink is barely dry on the legal documents that severed her marriage to Deacon Sharp, but that signature bought her the ultimate, unbreakable leverage over the woman who stole her husband. Taylor Hayes owes Sheila a massive, life-altering favor, and the devil is finally knocking on the door to collect her due in full. Let us rewind to the explosive moment of truth that set this impending nightmare in motion. Taylor was caught red-handed, sleeping with Deacon. Sheila had the knife in her hand. She had the motive burning in her chest. She had the perfect, uninterrupted opportunity to put Taylor 6 feet underground. But the reformed villainess made a calculated, chilling choice to spare her rival's life. Sheila dropped the blade and walked away, leaving Taylor breathing, but heavily and dangerously indebted to a psychopath. Nothing is free in love and war, especially when Sheila Carter is writing the contract. When Sheila handed over those signed divorce papers, she made the terms of her surrender crystal clear. She gave Taylor the clear path to marry her new boyfriend, but the bill is due immediately. In exchange for her life and her man, Taylor must deliver the absolute impossible. She must convince her fiercely protective daughter, Steffi Forrester, to lift the ironclad ban on Sheila and grant her immediate access to her grandson, Hayes. Taylor is trapped in a suffocating corner of her own making, and she is choosing the most toxic, destructive path forward. She knows exactly how Steffi feels about the woman who nearly destroyed their entire existence. She knows the trauma that haunts the Cliff House every single night. Yet, Taylor is firmly planted in her selfish me era. She wants her happy ending with Deacon Sharp, and she is willing to play a lethal game of Russian roulette with her family's safety to secure that ring on her finger. The betrayal begins with a whisper, not a shout. Spoilers reveal that Taylor will make her first underhanded move by targeting the weakest link in the Forrester Finnegan fortress, John Finn Finnegan. Taylor is going to corner Finn for a tense, private heart-to-heart conversation, planting poisonous seeds of doubt in his mind about Steffi's rigid boundaries. She will march into his hospital office, close the door, and begin the ultimate psychological manipulation right in front of his face. Taylor will look Finn directly in the eye and actively encourage him to give his biological mother a chance. She will weaponize her credentials as a world-renowned psychiatrist to validate Finn's dangerous, lingering empathy for Sheila. Taylor will argue that Sheila has shown genuine, measurable growth by signing the divorce papers without a violent retaliation. It is a masterful, sickening manipulation designed to serve one person and one person only, Taylor Hayes. Finn is already standing on a razor's edge, completely vulnerable to this attack. He desperately wants to believe in his birth mother's redemption, fighting a daily internal war between his bloodline and his marriage. Hearing his mother-in-law, the very woman Sheila terrorized, vouch for Sheila's changed behavior will completely shatter his final defenses. Taylor is handing Finn the exact justification he needs to betray his wife's trust and open the front door to the devil herself. But Taylor does not stop there. The ultimate betrayal requires her to look her own daughter in the face and lie through her teeth. Taylor is reportedly going to sit Steffi down in the middle of the Cliff House and actively encourage her to give Sheila a chance. She will frame this insane request as a necessary step for family healing, masking her desperate self-interest behind a sickening facade of maternal guidance and fake concern. Steffi's reaction will be nothing short of volcanic. She has spent years fortifying her life, her home, and her marriage against the lethal threat of Sheila Carter. To hear her own mother advocate for the monster who nearly destroyed them will send Steffi into a blind, feral rage. She will instantly sense that something is horribly wrong. Steffi is sharp, ruthless, and fiercely protective. She will smell the desperation dripping from Taylor's sudden pivot the second the words leave her mouth. The impending confrontation between mother and daughter will shake the walls of the Cliff House to their very foundation. Steffi will demand to know why Taylor is suddenly acting as Sheila's defense attorney. She will pace the floor, her hands shaking with rage, screaming at Taylor to make it make sense. The air in the room will grow thick with tension as Steffi realizes the woman who gave birth to her is actively advocating for the woman who tried to murder her. Will Taylor confess the dirty deal she struck in the shadows? Will she admit that she is trading her grandson's safety for Deacon Sharp's hand in marriage? The stakes have never been higher, and the impending fallout will leave permanent scars on their relationship. Meanwhile, Sheila Carter is orchestrating this entire nightmare from afar, pulling the strings like a master puppeteer. She is sitting back in her apartment, watching the Forrester family tear itself apart from the inside out. Sheila knows that she does not need to force her way into the Cliff House if she can manipulate Taylor into opening the front door for her. It is psychological warfare at its absolute finest, and Sheila is executing every single move with lethal precision. Deacon Sharp is currently celebrating his newfound freedom at IL Giardino, completely oblivious to the toxic transaction that secured his divorce. He believes Sheila signed those papers out of grace and acceptance. He is pouring drinks, laughing, and toasting to his future with Taylor. If Deacon discovers that Taylor is actively endangering Steffi and Hayes to pay off a blackmail debt to Sheila, his entire perception of Taylor will shatter instantly into a million pieces. This storyline is hurtling toward a catastrophic climax at breakneck speed. Taylor is playing a highly dangerous game with a woman who has zero boundaries and a history of lethal violence. By empowering Sheila, Taylor is not just risking Steffi's marriage. She is risking the physical safety of everyone in Los Angeles. Sheila's obsession with Hayes is a ticking time bomb, and Taylor is actively lighting the fuse just to keep her own bed warm at night. The sheer hypocrisy of Taylor Hayes is staggering, infuriating, and impossible to ignore. For years, she has positioned herself as the absolute moral compass of the Forrester family, constantly lecturing Brooke Logan about boundaries, appropriateness, and protecting the family legacy. Now, she is secretly aligning with a convicted psychopath, selling out her daughter's peace of mind just so she can keep her illicit romance with a former bad boy intact. Steffi is already fighting a massive, exhausting corporate war against the Logans. She is dealing with Hope's shocking defection to Katie's fashion house and managing a chaotic Forrester Creations in crisis. To be blindsided by her own mother's treachery in the midst of this corporate bloodbath will push Steffi to her absolute breaking point. She will realize that she is completely isolated, surrounded by people who prioritize their own selfish desires over her safety and the physical security of her vulnerable children. As Taylor continues to push this toxic agenda, the tension in the Cliff House will reach a boiling point. Finn will find himself caught in the brutal crossfire between his wife's absolute, justified terror and his mother-in-law's manipulative, calculated encouragement. Every conversation will be loaded with unspoken threats, paranoid glances, and impending doom. The foundation of the Shin marriage is cracking under the immense pressure, and Taylor is holding the hammer, ready to deliver the final, devastating blow. Sheila Carter is positioning herself for the ultimate power grab, and she is using Taylor as her battering ram. If Taylor successfully breaks Steffi's resolve, Sheila will gain the access she has craved for years. And once Sheila Carter gets her foot in the door, she never leaves. She will embed herself into Hayes' life, ensuring that the Forresters can never truly rid themselves of her dark, suffocating presence. The monster is not at the gates. She has an inside agent. The countdown to destruction has officially begun. Taylor Hayes is holding a lit match over a barrel of gasoline, convinced she can control the massive explosion about to rock her family. But Sheila Carter is a force of nature, and she will consume everything in her path. Taylor's desperate attempt to stay in her me era is about to trigger a chain reaction of violence, betrayal, and heartbreak that will alter the landscape of Los Angeles forever. Every single move Taylor makes right now is a step closer to the edge of the cliff. She is actively choosing Deacon over her own daughter's sanity, and the consequences will be deadly. When Steffi finally uncovers the full extent of this dirty bargain, the retaliation will be swift, brutal, and unforgiving. Taylor is about to learn the hard way that when you make a deal with Sheila Carter, you always end up paying with blood. Will Taylor's selfish betrayal cost Steffi everything, or will Sheila's master plan end in bloodshed? Drop your wildest theories in the comments below and hit subscribe for more explosive BNB scoops.